Welcome back to Turpentine VC, a podcast where we discuss the art and science of building successful venture firms, VC to VC. Today, we are joined by Diogo Mónica. Diogo is a general partner at Haun Ventures, a crypto venture firm founded in 2021 by former A16Z general partner Katie Haun, who co-led Andreessen's first 3 crypto funds. Diogo and I discuss the evolution, current state, and future of the crypto ecosystem, especially as it innovates infrastructure for more traditional industries. We examine the intersection of AI and crypto, the impact of blockchain technology on fintech, and the future of crypto venture. Please enjoy. Diogo, welcome to Turpentine VC. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Erik.
Diogo, why don't you give background of what Haun Ventures is and how you came to join it?
Yeah, Haun Ventures is a crypto fund. It was started 2 years ago by Katie Haun. Katie is an amazing human being, but also has been very known in the crypto industry. I think, as you know, she was a former federal prosecutor. She was on the board of Coinbase. She was on a series of other tech boards. She ended up co-leading A16Z Crypto Fund 1, 2, and 3 before striking out on her own and starting a new fund, aptly named Haun Ventures. It's actually 2 funds, not just one, but is a $500 million early stage fund and $1 billion late stage fund. And we invest, as I mentioned, primarily in crypto companies and digital asset companies.
And that's awesome. And so here's a prompt I want to do with you. Imagine that I went in a coma in 2017 and I woke up in 2024. And in 2017, I was pretty up to date with what was happening in the world of crypto as it relates to VC. At the time, people were saying, hey, is crypto going to change how VC operates on a sort of fundamental level, on a structural level? But then also just how big is this asset class going to be? Where are the opportunities going to be? Who's going to win? Is it specialized firms? Is it generalized firms? Why don't you give a little bit of an overview to my coma self who just woke up after 7 years?
Yeah. So as far as the size of the asset class, I will quote Matt Kohler and say that my job is not to predict the future, but to see the present clearly. And no comments on that one. I do think larger than the present, but nobody knows what the terminal size of this one. The terminal size. But in general, in terms of what has happened in the past few years, I do think the main thing that has happened is, as you know, 2017 actually we barely had Ethereum. We had lots of things that were happening, but really we were going and starting this phase of smart contract blockchains instead of just Bitcoin as, store of value, let's call it this way. Lots of narratives that can be put on Bitcoin, the store of value narrative. And so that smart contract platform really can do anything. Smart contracts are programs. Programs are Turing complete. And so they can definitionally do everything that you can do. However, this is no fault of Ethereum. It's just how it started. There was absolutely no scaling ability. There was a smart contract programming language that was a pretty unfortunate early choice that led to lots of hacks and lots of bugs. There was lack of infrastructure, there was lack of, in certain cases, liquidity for decentralized DEXs or these other types of decentralized exchanges that you can compose and create new things on top. And so now, this many years later, all of those things are done. We have and continue exploring, candidly, like all of the weird nooks and corners of distributed systems. And we have platforms that can do hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. We have lots of different clear use cases and integrations that allow you to go in and out of crypto. We have way more sophisticated on-ramps, so it's a lot easier than ever to turn dollars into crypto and crypto into dollars, despite the fact that the regulators have been extremely good at pushing back on banking crypto companies. With that asterisk aside, there's a lot more that has been built. There's a lot more that you can build on top of. And I know, Dan Romero, for example, I think that's a good example of something that took a while to mature. It's built on Base. Base didn't exist. L2s didn't exist. Optimism didn't exist. All of that is a sequence of events that had to happen for something like Farcaster to actually be able to be built.
And flesh that out a little bit. Why did they have to exist for something like Farcaster to be built?
So not specifically for Farcaster, but in general, I think the number of transactions that you have per second, the popularity being the curse of Ethereum. The more popular your program is or your smart contract is, the higher the fees go. If you have a blockchain that has tens of transactions per second, then definitionally, every time you're trying to settle to the actual blockchain itself, you're going to have contention. You're going to have rising fees. And so you can't really do the use cases that you want it to do. And right now you can. There's a lot of competing platforms, but also Ethereum itself is a very sophisticated distributed system that is open source that somehow has been able to evolve. You've had massive evolution, not just from proof of work, so using mining as the way that you get to consensus, but to proof of stake. That's an extremely complex piece of engineering that actually was flawlessly executed and deployed. And lots of different innovations are happening for you to have all of these different aspects, and in particular scaling as number of transactions per second, the inability of people of accessing the ecosystem easy, either developers or users. So that means more wallets with greater UX, with ease of onboarding, where you can kind of have companies like Privy, for example, that just abstract away the complexity of generating wallets. And on the developer side, SDKs, and the ability to really be building new applications, analytics companies. All of these is just, they're all there. They weren't there. In fact, we're potentially through the second wave of this infrastructure company. And we've gone in so many different directions that you can build upon, so many different blockchains, so many different layer twos, so many different ways of you having data availability, so many different ways of you having borrowed security from different blockchains, that right now it's actually like, it has to come back. So it has to come back to something that is more sane in terms of optionality, because right now developers do have lots of options on how to build these Web3 companies and these protocols on top of each other.
Yeah. Let's zoom out. Remember, I just woke up from 2017. Can you sort of make like a bit of a high level market map in terms of like how you bucket the different types of investable opportunities in the asset class?
So yeah, if we zoom out in terms of buckets, I think one of the things that you'd notice that you didn't have in 2017 is, of course, the institutionalization of Bitcoin. And what I mean by that is Bitcoin ETFs are now available to any American citizen that has a brokerage account. And so you can just search for BTC and you have one of the world's, if not the world's largest financial company, BlackRock, offering an ETF. That is a massive, massive change. The institutions have gone through all the hurdles that they needed to go through to actually be able to play in the ecosystem. And it's not just a Bitcoin, people sort of like, if in 2017 I told you that there was going to be a Bitcoin ETF, the majority of people wouldn't believe you. But if they were to believe that there was an ETF, then it would be Bitcoin. But here we are, there's going to be an Ethereum ETF very soon. And then if you kind of like map that out, the opening of the regulatory space and the opening of the institutionalization of crypto has happened in 2024 right now, that you just could not make a claim that was happening really in 2017. It was all about institutions are coming, and you can hear the stampede, but it took us up until 2024 really for that stampede to actually come to fruition. And it wasn't really a stampede; it was a little bit more of a trickle. That then one day you wake up and it's like a boiling frog or boiling water. Like, oh, actually, they're all here now, and all of them have a play. So that is one bucket, which is kind of like this institutionalization of crypto with ETFs. Within the same bucket, I would say that there's narratives that have been with us from day one of crypto. Things like real world assets. We have wanted to tokenize everything since day one, and for some reason, it keeps not happening. And right now, you actually do have BlackRock tokenizing treasuries. And you have BUIDL in this case, which is a way better way of getting exposure to these money market funds, because you have 24/7 instant liquidity on stablecoins that you can move around. So if on a Friday night you want to get liquidity on your T-bill, you don't have to wait for Tuesday morning, right? So you have to wait the whole weekend and then T+2 to actually, or T+1 at a minimum, to get your funds. So in that bucket and category, we have all the institutions are playing. They have specific plays. They have issued on public chains their RWAs and real RWAs. And yes, it's just the beginning. Yes, the ETFs really that are out are just the Bitcoin, but you have a very legible path for A, more ETFs, B, more assets tokenized and RWAs on chain. So that's a really good one. Another one would be other elements of product market fit. In 2017, we were very early in the stablecoin game. Right now, you have stablecoins as probably the killer use case for crypto right now, and with very clear product market fit. In 2024, you woke up and there's over $160 billion of stablecoins issued. In fact, stablecoins collectively are one of the largest holders of US Treasuries. I believe they're actually the 18th largest holder of US Treasuries. They're actually larger than Germany. They hold more US Treasuries than the whole country of Germany, which is kind of an insane stat. And that is not slowing down in terms of growth, and it will continue growing. So yet another bucket of programmable money is something that people, developers, and just everywhere in the world, people are demanding. It has pretty cool and crazy use cases that people are doing it with. One of which is just candidly just going back to our fintech days and all of the hype of fintech, but just rebuilding it without having to wait 18 months or 2 years for authorization for you to actually have access to financial rails. And that's actually a game changer for entrepreneurs, for people building companies, and incredibly exciting for a venture investor, of course. And then we can also go on what has happened in DeFi and how that has evolved, what has happened in, honestly, architecture of blockchains and how layer twos and zero knowledge have actually allowed you to scale a lot of this core underlying infrastructure in a very successful way. We can also talk to you about what is different between NFTs today and NFTs then, and how the hype kind of like came and went. There's lots of different buckets that we can like slot on. But I would say the three biggest ones are the infrastructure piece, are the DeFi on how the composability has happened and what has actually been successful there, the stablecoins as programmable money, allowing anyone to build any kind of company on top of US dollars, and obviously the institutionalization with RWAs and with the ETFs being the two biggest ones.
What do you think is something that feels underrated in terms of maybe something we haven't yet spoke about that mainstream isn't talking about?
So I feel like, and I've always felt that there's a big element of just positive externalities of crypto that we don't really talk about that much. And, part of the reason for it is because it's all lost in the meme coin mania and the ICO boom and whatever is the topic du jour. But I do think a lot about these positive externalities of crypto. So in one way to look at this is that the crypto VC community has actually poured billions of dollars into deep cryptographic research and zero knowledge, fully homomorphic encryption. We've even somehow made Reed-Solomon codes cooling it, which, there's the rise of erasure coding for decentralized file storage. So it's kind of fascinating to think through that we have poured so much money into fundamental cryptographic research, and how the reality of it is that the majority of it won't benefit just crypto. It is really about everything else that can be built with it. All of these zero knowledge and fully homomorphic encryption are going to have more impact in just normal corporates, database technology, which affects everyone, really, than they're going to have in crypto, which is a subset of its application. So that's kind of interesting for you to think through of we are funding fundamental research that is going to be used outside of crypto. And so as a venture investor, if the research is happening here, people are using it, of course, for what's right in front of them. So they're inventing fully homomorphic encryption or zero knowledge proofs, but then they're using it to do some settlement with Ethereum layer 2 technology back onto Ethereum, without realizing that, wait a minute, this particular piece of technology, maybe it's a lot better for an identity scheme that is actually private, or actually a CBDC that allows you to have the same types of components of cash with the ability of the banks maintaining their actual compliance elements on top of, while still maintaining the privacy aspects that the cash has, and without having to carry money, or really around just general identity. There's so many places on the internet that we have to share our identity with that just they didn't have to be. And those are not crypto use cases at all. They're just normal, traditional run-of-the-mill interactions that we have on the internet on a daily basis that could make made a lot better. So I do think a lot about these ones. Another one that is obviously a lot on our minds are these use cases around misinformation and the appearance of perfectly real Gen AI'd videos that just obviously are completely fake or completely out of context, and how we just have the perfect technology to actually help with this, help with origin, and even cameras these days are now coming with private keys that allow you to actually sign the pictures and potentially some of the videos that are coming out of them. And we created a technology that is amazing at coordination of multiple distrusting parties. And it would be fantastic that we would actually use it to solve this problem that is actually appearing. And so all of these things of externalities of crypto, and actually crypto technologies play outside of crypto, I don't think a lot of people look to, because you just use them for whatever in crypto gives you the most money, which usually is launching a token or launching a network. And so that's usually what it gets used for.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/turpentine. That's oracle.com/turpentine. oracle.com/turpentine. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a B2B SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication, skim provisioning, role-based access control, and audit trails. That's where WorkOS comes in, with easy-to-use and flexible APIs that help you ship enterprise features on day one without slowing down your core product development. Today, some of the hottest startups in the world are already powered by WorkOS, including ones you probably know, like Perplexity, Vercel, Jasper, and Webflow. WorkOS also provides a generous free tier of up to 1 million monthly active users for user management, making it the perfect authentication and authorization solution for growing companies. It comes standard with rich features like bot protection, MFA, roles and permissions, and more. If you are currently looking to build SSO for your first enterprise customer, you should consider using WorkOS. Integrate in minutes and start shipping enterprise plans today.
What do you think are the things that haven't panned out yet that me in 2017 might have thought, hey, ideally we would have had this by now, or that in 2034, or that is a long time from now, but that you think, hey, this is what the real promise is? Like, what hasn't yet panned out that you think has massive opportunity that maybe ideally would have by now?
Actually, in every single vertical, things haven't panned out exactly as we wanted them. That's just the case. I think maybe outside of sovereign resistant money, which has panned out exactly how people hoped, maybe even more than they hoped to get, and maybe outside of stablecoins. So let's talk about RWAs again. RWAs right now are very constrained towards money markets, but really the whole goal was about tokenizing equities, tokenizing bonds, tokenizing fixed income, and having the ability of having smart contracts to manage these baskets and do new financial instruments and having unfettered access to these financial instruments without actually having to go through the traditional hurdles that the financial companies make you go through. That really hasn't happened. We are in the early beginnings of it, and we do see the path, but it's still pretty far off. And so tokenizing money markets is very far off from tokenizing an index fund and having it available to an American citizen in the United States of America. Right now, that future seems a little bit far off. And even in RWAs, it's mostly about institutions getting more liquidity or faster access to their capital. That's the main use case, which is really not what we've been promising everyone for a long time. Another one that has just been, pet peeve of mine is the whole putting real estate on the blockchain or like loans on the blockchain, mortgages on the blockchain. These types of use cases that just require so much paper pushing and real world interaction. So many in the United States alone, every single state has its own little database of where things come from. They're just so complex and so hard to do without the ability of actually scaling worldwide. And those have kind of been left by the wayside. And the majority, if not all of those attempts have practically failed. And it's still yet like something that people are desperate for. And so the pain is very high, but somehow the solution and the specific products that have tried to actually ameliorate this haven't really been able to crack that nut. So there's lots of different things like that I think should be pointed to as we're not there yet. And 10 years ago, we said we would be, because 10 years is a long time.
And what about this sort of, there was this dream of, you mentioned Forecaster, but decentralized social networks, decentralized marketplaces, that there would, Uber, Airbnb, Facebook, that the next iterations of kind of the big Web 2 companies would be decentralized. What have we learned about, how has that panned out? Which are likely to be Web 3 and which are likely to not be?
So in general, something that has been very obvious is that people don't particularly care about privacy, and they're definitely not willing to go through hoops to get it. And so that's just one of the learnings that many people that have tried to go towards these use cases have found out. The other thing is that beating Uber means that you have to be much better than them. And you can't do that if you're already starting with both your hands tied behind your back with some technological disadvantage, which in many cases, decentralizing a platform by definition is going to make it less efficient than a centralized one, because you just have a different set of goals. And your goal is the ability of, I don't know, having a Byzantine fault tolerance and tolerate 3F+1, in which F is malicious attackers. And Uber does not have that. They trust their systems completely. And so if they have less restrictions, they move faster. So it's as simple as that. And so in a lot of cases, the Me Too types of products were always doomed to fail. Think about it this way. If I tell you that I want to create a new Uber, and I tell you that I'm going to do it with a technology that is less proven, harder to scale, slower, has all these advantages, and the only thing that I'm going to have as an answer as to why it's going to be better is because there's alignment of incentives, and I'm going to be able to overcome the cold start problem. I would say, yes, maybe you can overcome the cold start problem and get some early excitement. And tokens are amazing at that, but you won't be able to maintain it. You will have churn. It's incredibly hard to run this business. It is a massively operations focused business, and you need to be a world-class founder with a world-class team to solve it. And so nobody thought that just because you get crypto into it could just like solve these problems. And so that brings me to actually, like, we talk about tokens. Tokens are amazing. They're amazing in many ways, and they have a superpower, but they also have this super weakness. The superpower really is that you can overcome the cold start problem that is hard for many startups, which is you get these network effects kicking. You have an artificial way of doing so through alignment of incentives, through token issuance. You can actually get people behaving in the ways that you want it to. That's amazing. However, they have a super weakness, which is, especially for a venture investor, they hide away product market fit. You can't really see product market fit through the mess of what's happening. And when you're looking at it and numbers go up, then all of a sudden you realize that there's some fundamental thing that is broken. There's no retention, and traditional metrics sometimes help you, sometimes don't help you. And crypto metrics definitely don't help you in many cases. TVL and things like that are very gameable. It's very hard to judge like daily active users when it's on chain, and it's very easily fakeable. And all these addresses kind of look the same because you can generate as many of them as you want. So all of a sudden you have the super weakness of the product market fit is not obvious while having the superpower. And so the use cases for which that work, we've seen some of them, but it's not going to be magical for you to be able to compete against these behemoths of companies that have had amazing products for over a decade now, and we're just going to sprinkle some tokens into it and somehow win.
Talk about AI and how you think AI has or will intersect with crypto.
Look, AI and crypto, very candidly, the main thing working in AI and crypto is a narrative. It makes sense. People are excited. I get it. It's kind of perfect, actually. If you think about it, AI creates digital abundance and crypto enforces digital scarcity. So they're kind of like made for one another. But if you're seeing the present clearly, you realize that there's not a lot of it that is truly working. Maybe none of it is truly working yet. And so if you think about it, look, we first talk about decentralized training. Doesn't really make sense to have decentralized training in the sense that you're actually decentralizing the training of the models themselves, for example. And definitely not in a world where access to hardware is actually one of the scarce goods. So it's scarce, you can't access it. So it becomes very hard for you to kind of like create your decentralized system in the first place because you're competing with everybody else for the same types of resources. And then the other side is that maybe it's not decentralized training. It's actually a marketplace that uses crypto for decentralized training. And in which case, that's not really necessarily what I would call decentralized training, right? That is using crypto incentives and maybe just stablecoins to facilitate a marketplace in which your GPUs are accessible. And so, yeah, it uses crypto to a certain extent, but it's not really a crypto use case. So I don't think those are necessarily fair. Maybe they go into crypto because they add a token and they force you to pay with the token. Now the token has utility. So if you have a token, by definition, you're crypto. But really what they are is an attempt at a marketplace where you're adding GPUs and people are going to use these GPUs. And so that's not particularly interesting as a use case itself. And then we can think about decentralized inference. And at the face of it, it makes more sense, right? There are LLMs that you might run that have been trained on data and are generating outputs that it would be quickly taken down if it was in a centralized fashion. Let's just put it that way, right? You train these models on data and just producing outputs that is very close to something that was, so you're clearly going to get a takedown. And so you enter this like gray area of, should I be able to run a model that is trained on, I don't know, Disney data locally on my laptop and do whatever I want? Clearly, I'm not going to be able to host it on Hugging Face, right? And so that's an interesting one in which there's other gray area. There's not as clear, like, breaking the law that would be like sort of like BitTorrent had Linux as distribution as the good use case. I'm sure there's a good, very clean use case for it. But all the other ones that require decentralized inference are use cases in which you have to make some more assumptions about what these models have been trained on. And then the other places where you need trust, there's definitely a lot to be said about, can you trust the outcome of the models, and can you use cryptographic mechanisms to guarantee that these outputs are correct? So there's lots of people trying to use in zero knowledge, being able to prove that the models are correct. But look, you add 3-4 orders of magnitude of overhead in every single one of these things. And I never want to bet against engineers, so we'll only get better. But for now, I think just traditional incentives around, if the model has a bad output, the client will stop using it and paying for it. So it's a lot simpler for you to sort of like just a ranking system to judge a lot of these things. And I'm sure there's a lot of like details and elements in which the model output being provable and being cryptographically sound is absolutely required, but no use cases like that really exist right now. And so even that is not particularly exciting, right? And even if they exist, there's other alternatives that are a lot easier, that don't require zero knowledge and just running extremely complex circuits for you to achieve it. And then maybe you get to these elements that are more about data collection, royalties, and those are really intriguing. There really isn't an economy that is working at this scale, but I think that could be one of the first ones to emerge, where you have great solutions around high quality data collection of data, and in a decentralized fashion, it actually creates incentives for the participants to create better data and nurture their particular data sets. So in that specific element, crypto could be used for the auction mechanism, could be used for the coordination element, could be used for obviously the payments, but it could also be used for governance of which data is available and which is not available, which is something we can't forget, which is crypto does have this superpower of governance and creating communities with a cryptographic way of judging which direction the community should go. And that could be applied to IP, royalties, coordination, all of those types of use cases are pretty good fit for this. There's a lot of plays on every single one of the areas that I mentioned. There's lots of excitement. There's lots of tokens, but I would say that none of them are truly working yet.
That's a helpful overview. When people compare AI to crypto, it can be pretty daunting for crypto because people say, hey, ChatGPT is, like the fastest growing product of all time, or certainly or one of them. And you could just sort of see the use case and how, many, many millions of people are enchanted by it. And then people say, oh, crypto's been around for a long time too. And I guess, how do you try to compare or say, hey, like, what is the use case, or what are the use cases that justify the importance and the spend that has gone into the industry? Like, what have we accomplished here to date?
Yeah, I don't try to compare is the answer. I think it's perfectly possible that crypto has massive impact without ever an American living in California of a high socioeconomic class uses it on a daily basis. There's a world of different outcomes that do not require my grandma to use crypto on a daily basis and understand what Bitcoin is that are a success. And I think coming back to stablecoins is a great example. Programmable money is one of them. I think it would be fantastic if we just get a lot more innovation built on top of crypto. Crypto becomes the rails in which people are building companies, and they're building any kind of financial use case for settlement, for on-ramping their users, for actually just, you can right now with crypto create a crypto neobank, which is a bank that at no point actually touches the traditional banking infrastructure. All of the checking accounts are USDC and stable coins. You have high yield accounts that are yielding stable coins. You have potentially the ability in the future buying these wrapped tokenized securities. So you have your brokerage there. There's crypto ATMs. You have the ability of sending money peer to peer, which is just, it's baked in. And the way that you spend it is a Visa credential that is backed by your actual crypto on your wallets. And it's a banking account effectively, except that at no point it touches fiat. I think those kinds of things are becoming possible. And so at the end of the day, when you say, okay, Diogo, but what is my grandma using? Well, they're using Fintech. They're using an application that allows them to do something cheaper, better, faster than they were able to before. But at no point do they think about crypto as the way that they did it. I do think that there's, a large percentage of probability and likelihood that the big outcomes are really here. And then we have a whole other swath of outcomes in which NFTs become something you engage on a daily basis. It becomes part of your digital identity. And the more time you spend online, the more you want to collect these things. And then, there's all of these other elements of collections and human identity and the narrative around profile pictures. But even if that doesn't exist, that is clearly like consumer use cases in which there's a different behavior that Erik now has that you didn't before crypto. But if that doesn't exist, maybe 80% of the use cases are just under the surface. There's just a core financial infrastructure. And that would still be a fantastic outcome if we're able to allow anybody in the world to access the US dollar, if we're able to allow much cheaper transactions, much cheaper remittances, developers and entrepreneurs to build businesses much faster and iterate at the speed of a smart contract.
It's interesting. It's like, the famous Chris Dixon quote gets used a lot around the next great thing, starts out looking like a toy, but in crypto, there are a lot of toys and not every toy, it turns out to be the next great thing. So it's hard to sort of, differentiate between what is staying power and what's just kind of silly or worse than silly, just kind of like a quick, get rich quick scheme.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that. The same way that the internet, communication, if it's easier and faster, then all sorts of people can communicate easier and faster, good people and bad people. In crypto, it's 100%. If anybody can issue these tokens and there's the ability of anybody to buy them, then all of a sudden you have a way easier time for people to just be fragile in your middle. That's the other side of the coin of the distribution. That's absolutely the case.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Hey all, Erik Torenberg here. I'm hearing more and more that founders want to get profitable and do more with less, especially with engineering. Listen, I love your 30-year-old ex-FANG senior software engineer as much as the next guy, but honestly, I can't afford them anymore. Founders everywhere are trying to turn to global talent, but boy, is it a hassle to do at scale, from sourcing to interviewing to on-the-ground operations and management. That's why I teamed up with Sean Lenihan, who's been building engineering teams in Vietnam at a very high level for over 5 years to help you access global engineering without the headache. Squad, Sean's new company, takes care of sourcing, legal compliance, and local HR for global talent so you don't have to. With teams across Asia and South America, we can cover you no matter which time zone you operate in. Their engineers follow your process and use your tools. They work with React, Next.js, or your favorite front-end frameworks. And on the back end, they're experts at Node, Python, Java, and anything under the sun. Full disclosure, it's going to cost more than the random person you found on Upwork that's doing 2 hours of work per week but billing you for 40. But you'll get premium quality at a fraction of the typical cost. Our engineers are vetted top 1% talent and actually working hard for you every day. Increase your velocity without amping up burn. Head to choosesquad.com and mention Turpentine to skip the wait list.
Talk about the crypto fund landscape in terms of how do you think about crypto native firms versus generalist firms, or sort of, where has sort of crypto VC evolved? At one point, there was this thinking that maybe DAOs or other types of entities or sort of crypto native vehicles would replace the traditional structure of venture capital. Talk a little bit about how that has evolved or not evolved and what the ecosystem looks like.
Yeah, I mean, on that particular direction of DAOs replacing traditional companies, it clearly has evolved very little. There is some development, a few developments on Wyoming. As you know, the ability of a DAO actually having a legal representation or to be something that can open a bank account and can engage with other institutions. That's pretty cool because you have the online, or in this case, the on-chain, offline connectivity kind of figured out through Wyoming. So there's steps there, but I haven't really seen outside of communities that clearly have been succeeding and self-organized through DAOs. The folks over at Bored Apes and many others have organized themselves in this session with governance in a decentralized manner, using these DAOs for funding and using these DAOs as coordination. But it hasn't really changed the VC, as you're very well aware, landscape and how things are funded. And as you know, part of the conversation was actually around the ICOs and retail going directly into these projects. And that's not really how crypto right now, at the big leagues at least, is happening. You still go to venture investors. You are not sell it to non-accredited investors. You can do these rounds, you create a network, you launch it, and then potentially, hopefully, you get to your decentralized goals. And when sufficiently decentralized, maybe you get it listed on an exchange and now people have access to it. So that's the more traditional path now. ICOs where just retail is funding it. Definitely not really happening in the United States anymore, at least in that. So that was a flash in the pan, as many people predicted it was going to be, and as it should be, because there's laws around fundraising, and we should follow whatever laws, whether we like them or not like them, or should be better or not better. In terms of venture itself and how they've evolved, in the beginning, crypto venture was just engineers talking to engineers. In fact, when I founded Anchorage, there was no A16Z crypto fund, right? And that was 2017. It was still like just, Fund 5. It was Andreessen Horowitz's Fund 5. There was no crypto specific thing. So we hadn't really been there. And I do have Chris Dixon on my board. So we've kind of talked about this to a very large extent, the evolution itself. But in the beginning, crypto ventures were people that loved the space. They were religiously attached to it, which I think religion is necessary for crypto to exist. Not sufficient, but it was definitely necessary for crypto to exist. And the majority of this was engineers talking to engineers. And then somewhere along the line, it got professionalized. Larger funds were raised. Folks that had more traditional venture backgrounds came in. Right now, it's actually pretty interesting. If you think about it, I'm actually joining Haun Ventures. I'm the only GP that was a crypto founder. I don't think there's anybody really out there in any of the crypto funds that has that. And so that's kind of an interesting change in pace, where in traditional venture, there's so many operators and founders of great companies that have turned venture investors. And in crypto, that does not seem to be really the case. At least of the larger funds, that is not the case. And now what you have is the professionalization of venture funds, of crypto venture funds, which is you need to build a world-class company. You will need world-class help with regulation and how to deal with the volatility. Building a company in crypto is very, very different than building a traditional company. In traditional companies, you don't have 80% or 90% of your revenue just disappearing on a regular basis. Think about how to build a team that way. How do you build a team when you know that every 2 years, not sure when, 90% of your revenue kind of evaporates? How do you deal with the traditional growth? How do you deal with staffing? How do you deal with just revenue diversification? How do you deal with all of these? It becomes extremely hard to run a company in that mode of operation. And so now you do have people that are a lot more experienced. Crypto is no longer a very small niche. It's a lot more established, a lot larger. People have been building companies over the past decade. So there are a few successful companies and public traded companies that are out there that can be used as examples. And so it just became very different and got institutionalized across time. So now there's a little bit of crypto natives on one side, people that love DeFi, liquid token strategies. They love investing in this, and just the traditional firms, Sequoia and Ribbits of the world that now actually play in crypto, but are a lot more traditional in focus. They just see these as good businesses. And that's actually interesting, because at some point we might have a place where crypto becomes a lot more narrow, where a company that is using stablecoins just becomes a fintech company instead of becoming a crypto company. And so it's just a traditional venture fund that invests in a company like this versus being a crypto specialized fund. I don't think we're there yet. And I think one of the advantages of Haun Ventures is the fact that we do play in both worlds, because our reputation is amazing, and our pedigree and where we've come from and where we've done is traditional equity companies that generate revenue, that don't issue tokens. But on the other end, we have collectively many decades of experience in crypto. We have been through the tokens. Katie was on the board of Coinbase. I'm still executive chairman of Anchorage. I'm chairman of a layer one called Near. We understand, we're crypto native in the sense that we both understand the technology, but we also understand what tokens are and can have a liquid fund strategy, which is a major advantage. And I don't think traditional funds have that ability or that desire or that risk tolerance. And so it's still different right now. Crypto funds are still crypto funds. Let's see what the future brings in terms of whether they kind of collapse and crypto becomes more specific and more a subsector, or if it continues to be this way for longer.
Say more about the difference between fintech, or where fintech ends and crypto begins, or between what you own and what that Ribbit invests in, for example, that you own, invest in, or talk about where those lines are, how you think about it.
So for us, I don't think there's lines in the sense that we obviously focus on crypto, but it's crypto enabled businesses and crypto businesses. So we do play on both sides. And again, we do have a $500 million early stage funds in which, small checks all the way to growth stage funds. So we kind of support companies throughout their life cycle. We do things on the growth fund, for example, during the bear market where people lost conviction, we were buying up positions on companies like Chainalysis and Fireblocks, which are just, to a certain extent, run-of-the-mill SaaS-like products. And so you can tell me, Diogo, no, that's a crypto company. Fireblocks a crypto company. It's like, okay, it is a crypto company. But on the other end, all the traditional metrics that you're looking at and the types of products that are being built are traditional businesses in that way. But let me give you another one, which is a little bit harder to define right now. Imagine that you have a company that is doing remittances using stablecoins exclusively. Is that a crypto company? To a large extent, yes, because the rails in crypto are different. How do you engage with these smart contracts are different. You have to be multi-chain. You have to do routing. You have to do some crypto-specific things. You have to know how to generate wallets and how to safekeep them and who the partners are. So there's a lot of crypto domain-specific knowledge. On the other end, your business is remittances, or your business is payouts, or your business is distributions. It's traditional business. The APIs actually probably look the same. And in many cases, they're going to look the same as for a payments company that has crypto, the same as Stripe's APIs, except that they function in a very distinctive manner. And so you're looking at it, you, Erik, as the venture investor, and what are you investing in? Are you investing in a crypto company or not? And it's a little bit in the eye of the beholder, right? Now, you are investing in traditional metrics, things that the APIs look the same, the use cases in many cases are the same, but the rails are the things that either make it cheaper or, for example, allow you now to take payments in a country that you just couldn't before with traditional rails. So that's a major advantage. And so you're investing in a company that is expanding in the ability of your clients to take payments in South America or Africa using crypto, but they're still taking payments. It's still a traditional company. And so I could see both Ribbit and any other crypto native company both playing for the same sector there.
Yeah. And when you talk to an LP who's trying to get a sense for like how big is the crypto market opportunity, or like how should I think about even that question when the whole world is talking about AI at the moment, how do you help LPs kind of just make sense for why allocate to funds focused on crypto at this time?
I think one of the things that is easy to talk about is how at the end of the day, and we have created these companies that have these tokens that accrue value and that benefit massively from network effects. And so the winners are very big, and there's a ton of venture returns to be had in this space. At the same time, there's real use cases for you to point at that are not the use cases that people and investors dislike. So now that you have these very large players, you kind of like go through the RWAs, you go through the stable coins, you go through what's happening in ZK and technology and how that actually benefits. And they get it. They get it. They understand what the impact can be, and they understand the potential for outsized returns. It also helps that there's crypto funds that have consistently had like fantastic returns and have had great vintages. And so that also means that it's, as an LP, you're looking at allocating and you're looking at DPI, you're looking at having return on your investment. And so a lot of these folks want access and want exposure and want diversification. And this is, in many cases, really good diversification. I do think that there's a massive element of looking at these companies that gives LPs pause, which is everything that has happened around FTX and everything that has happened historically, which is you do not want black eye. You do not want to have been seen investing in one of these companies that shut down, not doing your due diligence as you should, maybe not taking a part position or seat where you should have. Those things are definitely something that they're very cognizant about and very careful about. And so when they're looking at allocating capital to a fund, they look at the team, and is the team a team that they could actually back for the long term and be responsible around doing this? Because many teams are what in the industry you call degen, right? Which is there's a lot less thought put into it. And the types of investments that they do are on the bleeding edge of risk seeking and risk taking. And that's fine. That is a type of bucket that you can put your funds in. It's just in general not the type of bucket that the LPs want to allocate to.
That's a helpful overview. I want to return to something you brought up earlier. You were talking about sort of the advancements of stablecoins. What types of businesses can be built with stablecoin technology?
I think in general, you can do every single fintech, but you can do it with crypto tech. You can do it with, if you're a loan company or a company that's doing lending, you can have a collateral that is actually on-chain, visible, and programmatically liquidated. So you can have things that are different in terms of trust for an actual consumer and a different value proposition. You can be faster at iteration with different types of tools. Right now, I can, on my laptop, in 15 minutes, create a program or a website that interacts with dollars. They are digital dollars, they're USDC, but interacts with dollars. That would take me months to do it in the traditional world. And especially now that there's a lot of scrutiny on a lot of these banking as a service companies and on these wrappers around bank charters and these APIs, there's a lot more scrutiny. It becomes a lot harder for you to actually access this. And so basically think about everything that can be built as a fintech can now be built on crypto rails, except that in many cases, you have cheaper transactions, you have programmable money. So you have smart contracts that can actually execute pieces where trust should not be handed over to the fintech. Doesn't have to be handed over to the fintech. In many cases, you have the ability of migration of clients from one to another platform a lot easier. So maybe customer acquisition costs, which is extremely high in a lot of these fintechs, can actually be lowered. Maybe you can actually make use of a lot of these crypto incentives. You can have lower infrastructure costs because if you are the ledger of record, in many cases is the blockchain itself, you're not really paying that much for that to actually be maintained. And you're offloading a lot of risks and a lot of costs from your platform itself. So you could have a leaner operation and a smaller team to achieve the same types of outcomes. So that's how I see it. I see it really, you can build any kind of money use case, but you can build it on these new rails. You can compose these things in ways you couldn't really before. Anywhere from like something that touches FX, now FX can be done in decentralized smart contract and DEX instead of actually doing and being done on one of the big FX houses. International payments and money movement. Maybe you don't actually have this model of paying a take rate that is a percent. If you're a consumer, it's very different to pay a few cents for a transaction to be approved than to take a percent of this. So all these are actually like very obvious use cases that are happening and they're growing. And the companies that are building these solutions are hitting scale and are hitting massive growth right now because the use case is actually like catching fire.
You mentioned crypto, consumer social earlier, or sort of crypto and social. Say more about where you're excited there, what that could look like.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I think the thing that I'm most excited about things like Farcaster is the fact that we went from before Elon Musk, stopped sharing data with us, a place where I think only about 7% of Twitter was actually actively monetized directly. So we're paying for the service itself and everything else was just supported with ads. And we go to a Farcaster in which in different models, but probably around 90% of users actually are paying to use the product. They're paying for their tweets, for their storage. And so it's kind of funny. I was talking to somebody on Haun Ventures internally, and she used to work at Twitter. And she told me, I have spent more money on Farcaster creating these like channels and participating that I've ever spent in like 10 years of using Twitter. So it's kind of a fascinating like anecdote and use case where because the crypto users already have the wallets there, already understand what's actually happening, they're a lot more willing to pay. So maybe there is a cap on the number of users are interested in actually owning their own social graph. And that use case doesn't really like go to a mass audience of hundreds of millions of users. But if you can have 10 times less users, but monetize at 10x the rates, that's still the same business at the end of the day, or a similar business in terms of revenue and obviously in terms of size. So those things are exciting. The monetization aspect, the reduction of friction for you to participate in a monetary system where one button, one click can actually do some financial transaction. Obviously, like there's Dan and the team innovating, and you've seen everything that's been coming out and how much traction they've had lately. And yes, it's still small traction compared with traditional metrics of social metrics, but it's like a small, rabid user fan base.
What have we not spoken about that you think would be helpful for listeners to know?
Well, one of the things that we haven't spoken about as much has been other, maybe potentially other use cases. We talked about alignment of incentives. We talked about externalities of crypto. There's another one that I've been playing with and thinking about and trying to fund a company in terms of interest, which is really that we've had this narrative for a while that data is the new oil, which, whether you agree with it or not is besides the point. But I think we're quickly finding that instead of being oil for many of these companies, data is actually toxic waste. The more you have of it, the likelier you are to die of radiation poisoning. And that's really interesting because we go from a world of collecting all the data and trying to collect everything because ads is the only way to monetize to a world where data is just liability. You need a bigger compliance team. You need more products. You need more and more scrutiny. There's the ability of governments to subpoena your data. Storage is very expensive, and you're always at the possibility of suffering a hack and having this information actually being leaked because you're responsible for it. So I've seen beginnings of people trying to move away from that, and lots of businesses in which if ads is not the way that we're going to monetize, then keeping the data is just a massive liability. And crypto can actually legitimately really help with this. And I think put the internet on a better path than the path that we're on right now. And that's another thing that is worth thinking through, which is this technology and these founders, they're creating things because many of them genuinely believe that they can build something better that came before, but not just something better, something just more aligned with their values. And I think that's actually fascinating. Part of the reason why I love investing in the space, and I love being in the space, and I'm a founder in the space in the first place, is because there's a huge component of ethos of how the internet should be and what the direction we should take. Yes, hidden amongst a lot of the noise, but that is fantastic to have these founders like really believe what they're building and do it in a way that would be better for everyone if this data wasn't collected in the first place, for example.
Yeah, that's a great note to wrap on. For people who want to go deeper, what more can you say or point them, or what other plugs do you want to leave us with?
Yeah, well, we talked about Farcaster. You can follow us on Farcaster. Haun Ventures is there. I'm there. So feel free to follow us. And we're investing across the life cycle of any funds that are doing anything in crypto. So feel free to reach out. Our team is small but mighty.
Amazing. Diogo, thanks so much for coming on and giving us a great tour of the ecosystem, and to be continued. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Erik.
Turpentine VC is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen and Econ 102. If you liked the episode, please leave a review in the Apple Store or rate us on Spotify. Hey everyone, Erik here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at eric@turpentine.co. That's ERIK @turpentine.co, and let's partner together.